now we're going to hear from Paulo Silva, who is the founder and CEO of Security Limits Incorporated, and an expert in the next generation of creating impenetrable cybersecurity for energy, financial services, and government. Good morning, Paulo. And
Good morning. Good morning, Paul. Thank you for a warm introduction. I would like to start by saying thanks to Peter Fusaro for giving me the opportunity to be here today to talk about security limits and Ironclad, which is our flagship product, and also for hosting a wonderful summit. The summit has been unbelievable. It's it's provided a tremendous amount of a wealth of information, and I think all of the listeners and attendees they do appreciate that. So with that being said, my name is Paulo Silva. I'm the CEO of Security Limits. We are a systems design and engineering company boutique out of New York City, and we do have an assembly facility in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm going to try and frame up what we're going to be discussing here today. I think cybersecurity is a very important topic, not just in the government sector, but on the private sector as well. Many of you are aware of the amount of efforts on the government side to converge the private sector with public sector in information sharing so that we can prevent the next big cyber attack against the electrical grid in the US or against one of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors defined by the presidential executive order that went out February of 2019. That presidential executive order was something that needed to happen. We're very pleased that it happened. The question becomes, how do you fund some of these initiatives to actually create an impact, right? My company, we work very closely with government dignitaries, people in the NSA, people that were the ex-assistant deputy secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And all of the feed that we get from government is telling us that the situation is getting worse, right? It's getting more critical. And the government has put together, specifically the DOE, many different programs to try and converge, open the doors to new technology companies to come in and present their solutions in the marketplace, and then try to create synergy between the private and public sector in respect to information sharing so that we can start strengthening the security of critical infrastructure across the US. So security limits, we have basically taken a back of the napkin approach, and I'm going to structure that as to, what is the problem today, and what I believe is the solution. And the problem today, in respect to how we're running and managing critical infrastructure, is that we have a tremendous amount of information systems infrastructure across the United States, owned by utilities, chemical, gas companies, even in the healthcare services, they are extremely outdated. And one of the main issues that many companies in the private sector face is, how do I create some kind of architecture that enables us to introduce life cycle management into those products? Because within technology, we all know that equipment, systems, and applications, they become outdated very quickly. So you ended up with a lot of large utilities in the US now running extremely old infrastructure. As they go about trying to upgrade those systems, they face challenges like, what is the pathway to upgradability and lifecycle management of those products that I have? If I were to buy something that's newer, a newer version of the product that I'm currently running, do I have a smooth process for upgrading those systems without creating, hazard situations such as massive outages across the US because you're trying to do a systems upgrade, perhaps in your industrial control systems. So one of the things that we've done within Security Limits, we've taken a back of the napkin approach, and we said, okay, what do we do with the old legacy systems? And there's no easier way to say this, but our approach has been, you got to let it sink. But you can't let it sink because it's providing very critical functions across critical infrastructure in the United States, right? In the world, for that matter. So what we've done is we designed Ironclad, which is basically an integrated, secure platform. It's a private cloud platform that we assembled and integrate. And within that private cloud platform, there are over 100 systems and applications that we carefully integrated specifically for companies that are hosting industrial control systems in the electric sector, energy sector, and for companies that are, looking to improve their overall cyber and physical security posture in healthcare and banks. So in our blue sky approach, basically we have this 21st century architecture that once built, it's something that's manufactured or it's assembled offsite and delivered into the utility's existing data centers. Okay, so now what is the problem in respect to private clouds today? So we're all familiar with companies like, Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure. If you're using any of the services, which we do believe now that many companies have become so highly dependent on public cloud services that it spawned a completely different market for other companies, smaller business, for coming in and helping them run their systems in the cloud. So if you go back, in the early 90s, we all knew that being able to share CPU resources, right, processing, central processing unit resources, storage, and memory, that there was a tremendous upside to companies in doing so. But you press forward now 20, 30 years, and we're starting to realize that the public cloud cost is creating some very interesting problems in the marketplace today, in particular for companies in the private sector. So you ended up with companies taking all their data, moving it to the cloud, and soon they realized that the cost of running that data in the cloud wasn't really the cost that was originally explained to them. So they ended up with, cybersecurity costs, physical security costs, day-to-day maintenance cost of that infrastructure. And there is a phenomenon now that companies are starting to realize, your CIOs and CEOs are having discussions about, hybrid clouds. IBM just launched yesterday. They basically said they were going to spin off a completely different infrastructure business unit, and we're going to be focused on hybrid clouds in the marketplace. And one of the solutions that we're offering here, IBM being one of our partners, we have, out of those 100 companies, we have companies like, Microsoft, Linux, CrowdStrike, and, and 50 other companies that we've taken their products, carefully integrated. And when you look at the value add of a cloud proposition now, one of the major problems is the cost of security, right? So if you're operating in the cloud today, you're going to basically end up with tremendous cost, which now has created a completely different markets for business to come in and provide what's called outsource cloud managed services, right? So within those managed services, they're providing 24/7 support, incident response monitoring, patch management, backups, and all of that. So if you think about how companies are doing business today, corporations move their data to public clouds. Now they're realizing that the cost to secure the data in the cloud is far outweighing the benefit compared to what if they were to own and run their own private cloud, right? So that's the major problem. So a lot of companies are asking that question now, because what happens is once the data is moved to the cloud, now these companies find themselves unable to manage those servers securely. So now they have to spend money in outsourcing some of the day-to-day management of those cloud portals and infrastructure in respect to patching, to security, and they're incurring those costs. Now, if they were to host it themselves, well, there is, some benefits there. So that was the problem, and now I'm going to talk about a little bit about the solution, and then we can jump into Q&A. But the solution is basically, if companies are looking to streamline operations and attain like greater visibility and control over their core business applications and processes, while at the same time reducing cybersecurity risks, then it does make sense for the company to start bringing in some of those cloud services back on-prem, But how can they do that? How can they cost effectively build an infrastructure that enables them not only to own that asset, but also to run it more efficiently and have greater visibility and control, not only over the physical security aspects of that infrastructure, but also the cybersecurity components that lie within. So Ironclad is an integrated security design where we've worked with, over different 50 companies. And within those 50 companies, we took their products and we carefully integrated to optimize those products so that they can meet specific regulatory compliance requirements within the energy sector, banking sector, and healthcare. Okay. So as we build these systems may consist of approximately 10 to 15 cabinets. And just think about, it's a lot of different tools and technologies all integrated. And when we ship it out, we work with the utility in establishing the requirements around private, energy and space within their data centers, which means that they don't need to build it from scratch. There's tremendous benefit within the Ironclad design in respect to energy consumption. It is a clean data center. Our PUE ratios are way below what the market average is, and that's being achieved through optimization of these systems. Most companies today around the world, they spend money on technology, and there is a tremendous amount of waste because most of the technologies that are being purchased, only 30 to 25 to 35% of the benefits of what the technology provides is being adequately and properly configured within the environment, right? So companies will buy something, they'll set it, they'll forget it, and they'll go to the next thing. And one of the benefits of working with Security Limits is that we provide them with this architecture, and within the architecture, it comes with a life cycle management, in which enables us to work with the utility in partnership to grow that architecture so that it becomes, in the future, the standardized enterprise systems architecture for a bank, a healthcare services industry, or in utility. So the solution that we offer as part of the Ironclad design is that we successfully implemented this technology with a company called Avangrid in the Northeast. We just finished an engagement there. And, this was a 3-year in the making design. And our approach is simple that we took in order to secure the infrastructure. We've taken a zero trust model in the way we receive the equipment. We do product verification, testing. We make sure that the equipment that's being shipped to us and it's being integrated within our facilities, that equipment has not been tampered with. Okay, all of the products and companies that are part of the Ironclad design, they are all companies established in the United States. So that addresses some of the most recent executive order from President Trump in respect to protecting the bulk electrical power systems, in making sure that we're actually doing business with companies that are, U.S. based. So as far as in respect to the solution and how we provide Ironclad, one of the things that we're trying to address is, how do we enable the utility to upgrade from the old legacy infrastructure? And the way we do it is very simple. We build these systems. We've done, over the past 3 years, the legwork of designing the system and making sure that it complies with regulations like NERC-CIP, like SOX compliance on the banking side, as well as some of the ISO and, most important, NIST standards, in order to make sure that when we deploy this system, if the system is going to be audited, that it's going to pass the audits. And it's a basically white glove approach in the way we design, the way we assemble the system and deliver it to the customer. I have some additional.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Got about another minute, and then we're going to take some questions.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so I guess the offering for Ironclad and in the marketplace today is that there is a private cloud movement that I believe is going to happen between now and over the next 10 years, whereas companies are going to start to realize that public clouds are not really the best environment for hosting, for example, industrial control systems, because there are specific requirements in respect to physical security requirements and the underlying network in which communications takes place. If you're running a SCADA system, you want to make sure that that SCADA system doesn't converge with any internet circuits, for example, right? Because that could eventually introduce vulnerabilities and risks to the infrastructure. So one of the things that we've done is we created this design that is 100% air gap built on the zero trust model. And we have over 15 isolation zones to meet most relevant regulatory requirements in respect to securing this infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Paulo, for that presentation. And a question that's come in is you're working with very core infrastructure industries, utilities, energy, grid, banking, and healthcare. How are you managing the introduction of your services to companies that are already facing cybersecurity risks on a day-to-day basis, and how are you able to manage this transition, and what kind of timeframes are you doing that in?
Very good. That's a great question. So I'll try and split that into two different answers. The first answer is how are we managing that? Within the Ironclad design, there are over 3,000 pages of a patent pending material that breaks down this architecture into modules, into sections, and keeping it really high level. We basically aligned the architecture with the OSI model from a physical layer all the way up to networking and application. So one of the things that we've done in the mapping is that if a company is dealing with a cybersecurity threat or vulnerabilities within their environment, and if you're a CEO, you're concerned about, I receive a tremendous amount of information that's telling me that, maybe the Russians, the Chinese, they're trying to come into the grid here in the US, which we all know they've been somewhat successful in doing that. So these CEOs can actually approach security limits. And one of the things that we can do is, because we own the holistic design, we have what's called Ironclad Lite and an a la carte design and engineering approach, which is part of our architecture. It's called CADAS, Centralized Architecture, Design, and Engineering Services. So because we already have access to this tremendous amount of intellectual property and information that is really state of the art and 21st century ready, we can actually create immediate impact to the utilities or, to all of these companies that are looking to maybe resolve a particular vulnerability within the environment, or maybe have a discussion about how can we better secure what I currently have, and maybe create a transition plan for going to your architecture over time. It takes about, for an Ironclad deployment, for us to integrate the system like Avangrid, like our deployment that we just completed at Avangrid. Within Avangrid, it took us 2 years to design in partnership and build the architecture, but we can actually deploy these data centers within 6 to 12 months. So we can actually have a completely brand new private cloud. So in utility or banking, healthcare can have a brand new private cloud infrastructure that doesn't occupy a lot of space. It doesn't consume a lot of energy. All the tools and technologies, everything from Microsoft, Linux, IBM, Dell computers. It's a hyper-converged platform. Everything integrated is delivered to them and fully operational and functional on day one, and 100% compliant.
Great. Paulo Silva, thank you very much for your
No problem.
presentation.